the disappearance of Avianca Flight 52, 1990. It was supposed to be a routine flight, a journey from Colombia to the bright lights of New York City. But somewhere above the freezing Atlantic, as storms raged and radios crackled with confusion, a deadly chain reaction began. One missed word, one misunderstood message, and then silence. When the wreckage of Avianca Flight 52 was finally found, the world was left with a haunting question. How could a modern airliner, with no mechanical failure, simply fall from the sky? Tonight, we revisit a forgotten tragedy, where survival balanced on the edge of a single sentence, and 158 souls paid the price for a system pushed beyond its breaking point. The calm before the storm. January 25, 1990. The day began like any other for the crew and passengers of Avianca Flight 52. In Bogotá, Colombia, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. Streets overflowed with traffic, vendors called out over the din, and above it all, the white and blue Avianca aircraft sat gleaming on the runway, ready for a journey northward. The flight's route was simple: Bogotá to Medellín, a brief stop, and then onward to New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. Captain Laureano Cavides, a seasoned aviator with thousands of hours logged, was at the helm. Beside him, First Officer Mauricio Klotz, young but capable, handled preparations with methodical calm. Inside the cabin, 149 passengers settled into their seats, unaware of the brewing tension thousands of miles away over the U.S. East Coast. That winter, New York was gripped by a vicious storm front. Snow lashed against the airport terminals, and dozens of flights faced delays. Overworked air traffic controllers juggled incoming and outgoing planes like frantic chess players. In the air, holding patterns began stacking like invisible whirlpools, circling planes above the clouds, all waiting for their turn to land. Still, for those aboard Flight 52, the mood was light. Children peered out of frost-glazed windows. Couples whispered about plans in Manhattan. Business travelers flicked through newspapers, sipping coffee. The cabin crew moved up and down the aisles, flashing professional smiles, offering reassurance amid minor turbulence. As the plane touched down briefly in Medellín to refuel and board additional passengers, Captain Cavides and his team received a weather briefing. JFK was congested. There would likely be delays. It wasn't unusual. Heavy traffic was part of flying into major airports. But behind the casual warnings, unseen forces were aligning. Departure from Medellín was uneventful, and as Flight 52 climbed into the dusky skies, the sun dipped below the horizon. Ahead, over the churning Atlantic, a different world awaited, one ruled by crowded radio frequencies, unexpected storm cells, and a system stretched to its limits. The crew checked their fuel, more than sufficient for a normal flight, including extra reserves in case of unexpected holds. Regulations demanded it, experience reinforced it. But regulations, experience, and even careful planning could not foresee the cascade of small missteps and misunderstandings about to unfold. As the lights of New York grew closer, the passengers stirred. The thought of landing, of stepping into the icy American winter, brought excitement. Few knew that Flight 52 was already entering a dangerous waiting game in the sky, one that would test every second, every decision, and every spoken word. The calm before the storm was complete. The clock had started ticking. Tension builds. Into the storm. Cruising at 16,000 feet, Avianca Flight 52 received its first instruction to hold. The voice crackling through the cockpit radio was firm but overwhelmed. JFK was overwhelmed with traffic. Flight 52 was to enter a holding pattern, circling above Norfolk, Virginia, until given clearance to proceed north. At first, it seemed routine. Holds were common, especially near major hubs like New York. The flight crew adjusted their course and settled into a slow, looping orbit over the dark, choppy coastline. But time ticked on, 10 minutes, 20, then 40. Each minute burned precious fuel. Inside the cabin, the mood began to shift. Flight attendants, trained to mask worry, moved a little faster, a little tighter. Children slept in their parents' arms. Some passengers peered anxiously at their watches, their layovers ticking closer to impossible. In the cockpit, Captain Cavides monitored the fuel gauges. There was still a reserve, but holding this long had not been part of the plan. He radioed air traffic control, requesting priority handling due to fuel concerns. The controller acknowledged, but priority was not emergency. In aviation language, The distinction could mean the difference between life and death. The first officer repeated their fuel concerns, but again, the phrasing stayed polite, deferential. They hinted at urgency but never declared Mayday or fuel emergency, the formal calls that would have forced controllers to act immediately. Outside, the storm worsened. Visibility dropped. Winds buffeted the aircraft. Other planes in the same sector faced similar troubles, their pilots shouting for vectors, clearances, instructions. Amid the chaos, Flight 52's increasingly urgent situation began to blur into the noise. Finally, after almost an hour of holding, they were cleared to proceed toward JFK. But the damage was done. Their reserve fuel, the legal and safety margin designed for emergencies, was almost entirely consumed. Flight 52 now flew on the edge. In the cabin, tension rippled beneath a surface of calm. Turbulence jolted the plane. Passengers gripped armrests. Some prayed silently. Still, few truly understood the danger. From the outside, it seemed like a delay, an inconvenience. Inside the cockpit, it was becoming a life-or-death race against an invisible clock. The crew weighed options. Diverting to another airport might have been possible earlier, but now they didn't have enough fuel to reach another destination safely. They were locked into their course, New York or nowhere. And yet, hope lingered. If they could just make the final approach. If the winds would just ease up a little. If communication could finally snap into clarity. If fate, so far merciless, would bend, even slightly, in their favor. But in the world of aviation, hope is no substitute for altitude, airspeed, and fuel. And Flight 52 had precious little of any left. Climax. The final descent. Clearance finally came. Avianca Flight 52 was permitted to begin its approach to JFK. The New York skyline, obscured by heavy mist and rain, shimmered like a distant mirage. In the cockpit, Captain Cavides and First Officer Klotz prepared for descent, weary but determined. But fuel gauges now stared back at them like ticking time bombs. They had no margin left. No second chances. As they descended, headwinds battered the aircraft. Airspeed fluctuated wildly. Visibility was poor. Then, just as the runway lights loomed ahead, a final blow, the approach was unstable. Winds pushed them off course. It wasn't safe to land. Instinctively, following standard procedure, the pilots initiated a missed approach, pulling up and circling around for another attempt. It was a decision made in seconds, but it sealed their fate. There simply wasn't enough fuel left for a second try. In the radio cabin, strained voices broke through the static. "We're running out of fuel," First Officer Klotz said, his voice tense but composed. "Okay," the controller replied casually, failing to grasp the severity. "We're running out of fuel," Klotz repeated, this time sharper, more urgent. But the critical phrase, Mayday or emergency, was never spoken. To the controller, it was just another tired pilot asking for preference. Not a plane minutes away from disaster. Suddenly, in the cockpit, the warnings came alive. The left engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Seconds later, the right engine followed. The cabin lights flickered. Systems powered down. Silence, terrifying, absolute, filled the cockpit as the aircraft transitioned into a powerless glide. Without engines, Flight 52 dropped like a stone through the storm. The crew fought to control the descent, aiming for a safe crash landing. They searched frantically for open space, any flat ground where they could put the plane down without slaughtering everyone aboard. Below them, dark patches of trees and suburban lights flickered by. Long Island's winding roads and frozen forests offered no welcome mat. The pilot's hands gripped the controls with desperate precision, trying to stretch every last foot of altitude. Then, impact. The aircraft clipped trees, tore through them like paper, and slammed into a wooded hillside near Cove Neck, Long Island. The fuselage shattered. Wings ripped apart. Sections of the cabin exploded open. Amidst the splintering metal and the freezing night air, chaos reigned. But miraculously, impossibly, there were survivors. The worst had happened. But for many aboard Avianca Flight 52, the story was not over yet. Resolution and reflection, lessons in tragedy. The scene at Cove Neck was harrowing. In the darkness, wreckage lay scattered like fallen leaves. Mangled seats, broken wings, and battered luggage dotted the frozen earth. Survivors, dazed and bloodied, stumbled through the wreckage, calling out into the cold night. Rescuers arrived swiftly, local residents, firefighters, paramedics, drawn by the unearthly noise and a rising column of smoke. They fought through tangled trees and treacherous ground to reach the survivors. In those first precious hours, lives were saved by sheer determination and humanity's instinct to help. Of the 158 souls aboard, 73 perished. Most deaths occurred upon impact. Some might have been prevented with faster emergency response, but the crash site's remote location complicated rescue efforts. In the aftermath, the investigation unfolded meticulously. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, pieced together every radio transmission, every mechanical factor, every human decision. Their conclusion was grim yet illuminating. Flight 52 crashed because it ran out of fuel, a simple, devastating fact. But why had no one understood how desperate their situation was? Language barriers played a key role. In Spanish, asking for priority can carry an implied urgency. In U.S. aviation English, however, priority and emergency are distinct technical terms. Without explicitly declaring an emergency, controllers treated the flight as merely delayed, not endangered. Fatigue, poor weather, and a series of cascading miscommunications, both in the air and on the ground, combined into a perfect storm. As a result of the crash, sweeping changes were implemented. Pilots worldwide received enhanced training in emergency communications, emphasizing the need to clearly declare fuel emergencies without ambiguity. Air traffic controllers were trained to recognize subtle signs of distress and to probe more aggressively when pilots seemed hesitant. Fuel management regulations were re-examined and strengthened, ensuring more conservative planning and quicker diversions. The story of Flight 52 became a case study, not just in aviation schools, but in fields that deal with crisis communication and system failure. It taught a painful but essential lesson. Small misunderstandings, in a system as complex as aviation, can become fatal. For survivors, the memory lingers, the terror, the chaos, the haunting absence of friends and family who never walked away from the wreckage. For aviation, Flight 52 left an indelible mark, a warning echoing through the skies. In times of danger, clarity is not just important. It is everything. In the silent woods of Cove Neck, the memory of Avianca Flight 52 still lingers. A reminder that in a world of precision and technology, it only takes one moment for tragedy to unfold. Some mysteries leave scars. Others leave lessons. And some leave questions that still echo through the skies. If you want to uncover more forgotten stories and unsolved mysteries of the skies, make sure to subscribe and stay with us on this journey into the unknown.